Hey, Tom.
Okay, I can hear.
Yeah, can you move back a little bit so we can see more of you? All we can see is the top of your head.
Well, I was purposely trying to hide a bit.
Well, what do you mean? You're such a good-looking guy. Why do you want to hide that good-looking face and all that big curly hair?
John, I think in your old age, John, I think you're half blind now. There
you go. Okay, but so if everybody's ready, we'll just start. So our guests tonight are Tom Porter. Tommy was one of the original people that started the Freedom School back in 1979 now. So I was going to have Tommy talk a little bit about the history of the Freedom School. Also with us today is Elvera Sargent. She was the director of the Freedom School for a very long time. She now runs friendsofthefreedomschool.org, which is a group of people that are working to help the Freedom School raise money to build a new school for that they're working on.
Hello.
And also with us is Kawennahente Clute. She she actually went to school at the Freedom School and then has been a teacher there for over 15 years. And then again with us is John Stokes from the Tracking Project. John has done a number of workshops and programs with Indigenous kids all over the world. So he has a very good perspective on a different way of teaching things. So tonight we were going to be talking about the Haudenosaunee perspective on teaching our children, because right now where all kids are going back to school, but things have been a little messed up because of COVID for a second year in a row. So a lot of folks are probably thinking about homeschooling or looking at a different way of teaching versus the traditional American way of teaching school. So I wanted to bring in Tom and everybody to just talk about a different way of teaching our children so that they have the opportunity to grow up to be real human beings. If you wanted to start, if you could talk a little bit about the reason why you and all the other folks started the Freedom School, and a little bit about the history of it way back when, you know, what inspired you to start doing this, because you were really the first nation to really do this.
kadiwi wahe ena kana kwadi wahe lukodako na sopaka hanyo ni oni na achi don sonwa ne wi wahe ni oni lukodako ne wasugo hane ne ichi sotoko di weras asha ahonu nisak ne jikani kalunyo jo ne katengyo jo ja lukni oni te kalako ge ne lukodako jikalutake ne aska ichi sotha sotone ka kalako ne wi wahe te sogo wi kadok ana sego kadina yeli wa yelich ne juniori de sogo wi ne kadiwi wahe ne de kani hat ne kadiwi wahe chido wati a to kene ka kalako ne wa ne ana haswat te de ona kadiwi wahe agwe ko wi hunda kalite ne ayin tosla suwa kadiwi wahe agwe ko gidi wakti ke junior to kada ko songo ya dison dan so ha eno ko na ba adi donyo ne wi wahe ni oni ne lukota ko ne untutka wanyo ko sunda denyo na hoda agwe ni ayin ko ya take dan se ko ne justo kolonyo di kalon ya kadiwi wahe ne osogo hane ne kai nyongwe take lunya ke lono kadiwi wahe ne seko radio take ne kia danuna ka un chap ko tawon ye ta kadiwi wahe ne onan sonun jayo songo ya disan ne kadiwi wahe ne kai ne jiniet ko ta ko ti hun jade dan de sago we ne ko sot slaga ha shiwa se ti hun jade ne we kai nyuli wa ke I don't hala tuksak ne we wa junior liwa luko ta ko ti hun jade ta kadi agwe ko kadi se ko yu ne ne jini huye la sangaya di so ne ali huni kadi lo ani ko la so to tana ne dali on radon sha ne kwa yo ko no di chiro no hala de sangaya di so sangwa da suyos no wa on sla di ta kadi yo to ko ba di ko to he kadi we wa he ne to kadi wat ke ni kadi wa no dongo junior rio wa dali wa tandi no on sla di on kadi we wa he you chane so no do ka hun ka tiele hawana dini junior wa kat
Yang kwa hiyo yana legit ko na hoda oya owana susukwa tunde ndak yuksa ko kyado now Holly chica John well Thomas finished with his the opening address that he just did. It was a beautiful one.
Well, Tom, I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about in the beginning when you and all the other folks got together, decided that you wanted to actually start a school. What was the reasoning for it, and your inspiration to start the school?
well just speaking personally my own thinking or my own thoughts and there may be other experiences that other people have been thinking about that might be similar to the way I was thinking, although we never had a summit or a meeting to see if that is in fact true. But I suspect because we all were put through the same institutions and the same social programs from the Canadian American government, that they probably we had lots in common of what we were thinking about. But I don't know that for sure because we never really had a meeting about that particular part. So from my part, here's what I'm going to say. When I was a young kid going to school, first of all, my grandmother, it was kind of contradictory what she sometimes would say or respond to. because but you have to understand the history. That's why sometimes we're not consistent because our mood and our feeling changes as to what happened in the history to us. So that's why it's not always the same. So maybe it'll be self-explanatory as I go on. Um, I know grandmother didn't want us to go to school. She thought that if we go to school, we will get brainwashed. Um, the way the European or the American people are, they want us to become like them. And so she was sort of reluctant for us to go to, for me to go to school at least. I know that because she told me that before, and she even tried to go to school. And that's why myself, I didn't go to school until I was pretty near 7 years old, I think, when I started school. And that's only because the government came over there. They found out I wasn't in school and they wanted to know why. And so um, my grandmother and my mother got caught because they were trying to purposely keep me out of school because our grandmother said that the people they seem to be ashamed that they're Indians or anything to do with our culture. They don't really want to identify with it or claim it. In fact, they walk away from it. And she said that's not what the Creator wanted us to do when He made us as an Indian. He wants us to be proud of how He made us. And those are some of the ways that she used to talk. And she said, and myself, she says, I I can't, he said, I talk only just our Mohawk language. And those that goes to school, a lot of time they come back, they can't talk our language anymore. They don't want to talk. And so that's why I didn't start school with the other kids until the government forced it. And they said they were going to send my mother and my grandmother to Malone County Court because they didn't send me to school. And that was against everybody has to go to school. So at that time, I remember begging my grandmother to let me go to school because if they were to put my mother and my grandmother in jail in the Malone, they don't talk Mohawk over there. My grandmother doesn't talk English, and they will put my grandmother in the jail, maybe because of me. So I begged her to let me go to school at the Mohawk school, and I told her I'll try not to never forget how to talk Mohawk if you let me go to school, because I didn't want my grandmother to go to jail. So that's why I begged her, and she didn't say yes and she didn't say no, but she did call one of her niece, not too far from where we live, to come take me to school that time, and that's what happened. I went to school. When I started the school, the Mohawk school, I went there uh, with the idea that I don't want to get assimilated or I don't want to get brainwashed. And I don't want to be one of those that turns my back on our Indian tradition and identity. And so I didn't listen to the teachers. I just kind of put a stone in my ears, and so I don't have to get brainwashed. And as a matter of fact, it's real stuck in my head that I didn't even know what ABCs were in a first grade or second grade or third grade. I think I was in a fourth grade or fifth grade at the St. Regis Mohawk School when all of a sudden the light turned on and they were talking about the ABCs, which I was supposed to learn in kindergarten, I guess, or first grade. And finally, at fifth grade, I understood ABCs was for. And before I learned how to read just by memorizing what the word looks like. I didn't know how to do phonetics or because I was putting a stone in my head because my grandmother don't want me to get brainwashed. But anyway, so I knew at that young age why do the American people make us go to their school? Why in that school where they have, why don't they teachers talk Mohawk? Why don't they honor the Mohawk people and teach us the way a Mohawk people is supposed to be? It's always like a foreign people talking to us and trying to instill their values on us. So as a little kid, before there was anybody talking about Freedom School or having our own school, those were the thoughts I used to think when I was a kid going to school. I thought it was so unfair that we had to do that. And of course, there was other experiences I had, but that's for another time. So, anyways, now getting back to the Freedom School. So then myself and then I had an aunt. Her name was Anna Jock, and this is before the Freedom School. And so we used to talk a little bit about it, her and I, about why don't we have school? Why aren't we a strong enough people and courageous enough and smart enough to have our own school instead of American or Canadian school for our kids to go to? And after a while, um, but because we're colonized, even though we went to school reluctantly and with the idea not to really learn or get brainwashed, every day after day and month after month and year after year of forced education, um, those values begin to enter your subconscious and become who you are. Even if you were repelling it, it still will be absorbed by you. And that's what sort of happened to me. And it happened more to others, more than it happened to me, because me, I had a grandmother who was conscious about that. Others, their no grandmother never said nothing like that to them. So they went to school and they just listened pretty much whatever they were told. There was no hesitation. Anyway, so then before the Freedom School, uh, my aunt and I were talking that how come we're so afraid of American police and American people and their institutions or their government stuff? I don't have the courage to do it. So you know what my aunt did? She had 15 kids, you know.
Wow.
She was a Bear Clan woman. And so she began to um, organize, I guess. And so she said, well, it's time we make our own school, she said. And so she, where she lives, she had a building over there and she started, this is before the Freedom School. And they called it the Indian Way School. This is prior to the Freedom School or anybody. And so she started to try to teach there, and myself and others volunteered to help her. But we didn't have no curriculum. We didn't really have nobody to teach us what to do, where to begin, or how to approach it. But we just like in there and try to handle it. Uh, so it had a lots of good things and a lots of not so good things because we didn't know, nobody taught us how to do it right. But we did, and my aunt did the best she could. And but anyways, the school lasted for quite some time, uh, and there was a lots of reluctancy on behalf of the Mohawk community. They kind of thought my aunt and us who were helping the Freedom School were kind of I don't know the word what you would call it, but renegade or troublemaker or something like that. That's how we were kind of viewed. But that didn't deter my aunt. She was a stubborn woman, and she kept giving it all that she had, even though she wasn't trained to do it. Eventually, I kind of had to go to work and whatever, and I kind of step aside from helping her that time, and then later on we had a trouble, but we always were trying to talk about starting a school, but in our mind, subconscious, we were afraid to do it, although we wouldn't admit it, but in our subconscious, it's only now I can sort of admit that because back then that pride you don't want to admit it like, but after you get a little older you start to review the history in the past, and then you can see where it's okay to talk about because it's the truth. So then in 1978 79, our reservation had trouble, and we crisis like almost like a civil war, and so we had a big civil like a fight with the tribe, and because they wanted to bring New York State police law on reservation, um, and they never asked the people if that's what we want to do. So they had Indian police, but they followed New York State law, and probably they still do. I'm not sure. Was the source of the civil conflict that we had, the traditional versus the kind of system people. And anyways, one of our leaders got in trouble with them and the programs they had, and he was put in a jail in Malone, one of our leaders. And then the people got upset because they did that. And ended up that the people went over there to the tribe and they demanded that the police have a meeting with the traditional leaders about what they're doing. And sometimes there was problem within the people. Anyways, it didn't turn good. It didn't turn out good. And so there was fights over there, fist fights, and guns started to come out, and they took over the police station. And our chief didn't tell us to do that. He just said to go there and invite them to meet with them. But some of the young people went ahead and they had fights over there, and pretty soon they took over the building, which our chiefs never told us to do that. Do that. And after that, uh, there were 48 indictments, sealed indictments, to arrest the that were in there, taking over that building. Um, and because it was a sealed indictment, nobody knows who's going to get arrested um, for taking over that building. And so we would sit down and figure out whose name is possibly on there, and the possibilities of names was more than 48, and it's probably about some 80 or 100. And so we all ran Thompson's house or land. He's the one that got arrested at first for another thing associated with this crisis. And so we couldn't send our kids to school because the police surrounded our encampment at that time, and the encampment lasted for 2 years. So now we had to stay in there. If we got out, then we could get arrested from the seal indictment. Then there could be more trouble. And it was a terrible, terrible time, uh, heavy time at that time. And so we can't send our kids to school because they might take our kids away, and that's how they'll get the sealed indictment, arresting people. So we didn't send our kids to school. So that's the time when we started the Freedom School within that camp in 1979. Although we always have a real school, except for my aunt and her attempts. Um, Others we tried, but we were always afraid to really do it. And but we started it at the Freedom School because we didn't have no choice. So, in a sense, even though there was a civil war, it was the thing that caused us or made it so that we had no choice to do something to educate our kids. That's the beginning of the Freedom School, and I was just one of the parents that was a part. There was many parents that were together that started that school, and so we worked together, volunteered together, and we taught. And even at one point, I also became the director or principal of the school too at one time for 1 or 2 years. But we used to mop the floors, sweep the floors. We took saws and hammers with non-native people that came from different communities, from Massachusetts, different places, brought their saw and hammer, and fathers and uncles pick up hammer and saw. And I remember Brian Cole up there cutting cutting the rafters and putting up trusses, and we had lots of non-natives came to help from our network of friends, and that's how the original Freedom School uh, got constructed. And then we said that, well, we don't want to follow the American or the Canadian people's school the way they do it. So we want to do our own. And so they call it, so we're going to be free. Yeah, but when you own, I'm going to be free now. So that's why they call that the Freedom School, because that's the word that says, you got the no. That means we're free now. So we translate that over to call it Freedom School. I believe that's what happened. That's how it got its name. And so we became teachers, and we didn't have hardly no money to pay the teachers, so we had to volunteer long time, and then we have to sweep the floor every day and mop the floor every day, and the parents would take turns to do that. 1 week, certain parents would do it. I think it went by the clans. Bear Clan, for 1 or 2 weeks would have to do all that work. And the next week or 2 weeks, then the Turtle Clan would have to do it. And then the next week or two, then the Wolf Clan would have to do it. And then the next 1 or 2 weeks, Snipe to do all the janitorial part. So everybody in the community, we were using our clans, we were using the way the Creator told us that we should work together. And so the Freedom School opened the door to the revitalization of courage and guts, and to try to now take for the first time our future destiny in our own hands. And throughout the years of the history, the people has helped us, not just Indians, but other Indians from other nations, and a lot of people from America or Canada, non-native people also came physically to help us and financially to help us over the years. I have to say that the Freedom School was really a miraculous movement and continues to be such, but always at the edge, just barely coming enough to continue without quitting. And I know that our lounge house, uh, a lot of time the students that went to the Freedom School are able to run a lot of our ceremonies at our lounge house because of the Freedom School. And the Freedom School connected with our tradition. And so I seen some of our young guys to bury people. That's not easy to do. And they were just young, and they stood up, and they bury our elders. And I've seen them also conduct marriage ceremonies. That's a long speeches that goes with that. And those young from the Freedom School, I've seen them participate in that. So I am sort of uh, happy now. Um, the fears when I was young, the elders that are no longer here used to say, maybe someday when I die, this is elders, what they said, there will be nobody left to run our ceremonies in our longhouse. And I don't know who's going to bury me when I get old and die. Or maybe they just throw me in a ditch and nobody ceremony how to respect a burial. That was their worry. And I used to, when I talked to them, visit them, which I did a lot when I was growing a young guy, they would actually cry because the future of holding up our tradition and our beliefs was at the verge of extinction. And so the movement of the Freedom School, the birth of the nation again. And so I can't tell everybody how important it is. And I know I heard Freedom School say lately that they want to try to raise $5 million. I heard, I think that's what I heard, to build a real school. This time, a real school where they got toilets and showers and auditorium and like a real school has. And but we'll continue our curriculums. And the curriculum that we started with, we said would be the Ahonda Kalihodekwa, which is the Thanksgiving address. So all teaching would be within the perimeters of the Ahonda Kalihodekwa, the Thanksgiving address. So that's what I know. I can remember about the Freedom School and how it started. It was all the parents, because of civil unrest, that forced us to really do the Freedom School, and it took that veil of fear that was ingrained in us through schools and missionaries away. It forced us to put our nose to the grindstone. And although it was hell to go through, I'm grateful because that's what got us up. So I say thank you to you give me the chance to tell at least some of the things that I remember. I hope it's accurate, but in my mind, it's accurate as can be.
That's
Yeah.
all that matters is what's in your mind, what you remember there. Thank you so much, Tom. I appreciate all of that. Elvera, if you could unmute, and it was interesting. I wonder if you could talk a little bit. I know you were the director for a long time, and you've worked at the school for many years. If you could talk a little bit about the necessity of teaching the language, but rooting it within your traditions and customs and ceremonies, so that the language just doesn't become a textbook, something that somebody learns about, but it's actually something that you apply in your life on a daily basis, and how important that is.
Um, okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
very good.
Well, first, let me give you a little bit about my history. As far as, I went to Indian day school here in our community, but I have relatives who went to residential school. Um, Even my mother was in a residential school, but but I think uh, I think one of the things though from it was that it made us stronger as far as living the kind of life we had to live. So I went to school down Snai, and right now there's a there's an Indian Day School settlement, which they're offering all the students that went there, but might have been abused. And there was a lot of abuse in those, even the day schools that were located right in our community. Um, so yeah, so and then I came to the Freedom School after I lived away from here for about close to 20 years. And then when I turned 40, I decided to go back to school. And I went to New Hampshire, Southern New Hampshire University for a master's in community economic development. So from that, I was able to get a grant, a scholarship that allowed me to work several hours a week. And I picked the Freedom School because I looked at what was available in the school that included language, and environment, and also needed help. And that was the place where I found that. So I went there and asked them, can I do this here? And so they agreed. And that was I believe it was 1995. And I didn't, for a long time, I continued to work at other places. But then finally, I think it was 2001, I finally accepted the invite to go and manage the school. And so I did that for a while. I didn't manage the school all that long. It was about, I don't know, maybe 5 years. But since that time, I've managed the Friends of the Freedom School, and I work closely, always have worked closely with the managers, new managers at the school. It's a really hard job to manage the school, because there's so much involved, and you're also the liaison with the parents, and having to organize fundraisers, like the community fundraisers. Um, we've been having annual dinners and annual events, to raise money for the school. And this year, we raised the most money ever. And it's just, I mean, it doesn't support the whole budget. Our budget has gotten very big. Um,
Well,
so
that's
I'm
really well. That's good because what the other thing too is you folks don't get money from the federal government like other
right,
schools do.
exactly, yeah.
That means a lot.
Yeah. For on our part, the Friends of the Freedom School, we have raised, we have taken some money from the government, but it's always to enhance the programming at the school. Like we had a 3-year teacher training program because we knew we had to replenish our teachers, but we also had to teach them the language first. So, and then teach them, place them in the classroom so that they would know how to teach. Because when individuals come out of university and want to teach at our school, we have to retrain them because they've been taught in the other way, in the dominant society's way of teaching. And but we use our own knowledge and our culture to teach our students. And I think it's very important for us to do that because as our children need to know where they're coming from and who they are. And this is where the Freedom School teaches them that. And one of the things that I recently, I did I ordered some T-shirts and I designed it where, because of all this stuff going on in Canada with all the um, bodies being found at these residential schools, it's horrendous. And so our school is the opposite of that. And so uh, on the T-shirt, I wrote, oh God, I was get emotional. Uh, but I wrote Akwesasne, the Akwesasne Freedom School, the place where you're taught love, peace, and good mind. And then on the back of it, I have all the elements of the Ohanda Kaliwade, It's real beautiful. I should have brought one in to show. I don't know if you can see it, if you could see it, but anyway, it's real nice T-shirt. So that's gonna be on our website. We do have a website. It's www .foafs.org. Um, we don't have the T-shirt up on there yet, but we will have it up there soon. We're getting a little behind in our marketing of some of our stuff, but we've been so busy because we help out. We're a separate organization, but we help out at all the events at the school. Before COVID, we used to have fundraisers quarterly. But with COVID, we haven't had them. Even last year, our quilt auction and the survival race and all that were virtual. But this year it was in person, and it was very successful event this year. Um, we had so many quilt donations, even not just, that's what the parents have to donate as part of their tuition is a quilt. But we had other quilts donated by, there's a group from U Pulse that donates a quilt every year. And it's real beautiful. Their quilts, that usually turns into bidding wars when they come up. And then our own people, a group here got together and they did blocks and then put the quilt together. And that was, it was really pretty quilt. So all these quilts were just, they were amazing this year. And I think one of them went for like $6,500. And I was like, oh my God. So we had 44 quilts that went up for auction.
Wow.
And it's always a lot of fun. We always have food, all kinds of food. There's a motorcycle club that does what do you call it, charity run for us every year, and that's growing. This is the third year that they've done it. And it's called the Red Drum Motorcycle Club, and they do charities and help out at various events in Indian country, and there's chapters all over the U.S. and Canada. Um, what else? So I think I'm gonna take a break and let somebody else. I need a drink.
Why don't you go get one of those T-shirts so that you can show us later
Oh
on?
yeah, okay, I'll do that. Yeah. All right then.
Yeah.
Maybe
Kawennahente, I was you went to school at the Freedom School.
Yes.
And now you're teaching there. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about teaching the language and rooting it within the customs and ceremonies and the importance of that, and just how you go about doing that and working that and pulling it all together for all the kids.
Nyawa for inviting me. Just to touch on a little bit of what Sakokwenionkwas and Konwanahktotha talked about. Due to residential school influence in the community, both my parents were affected. Their mothers had gone away to school at residential schools, and they managed to retain their language, and when they returned, they were still able to transfer their language to, if not all of their children, a good majority of the children. So when my mother and father got together and we had a blended family, and the first children that they had, they didn't make a conscious effort to transfer the language to them. So my older siblings don't have the language. And when my sister and I were born, my parents still didn't see, I don't know if it would see the importance of the language, but they just thought like, oh, well, there's so many speakers in the community, our families speak, that they just assumed that the language would always be around. And it wasn't until the Civil War that Sakokwenionkwas mentioned that had happened, my parents were involved in it. And when the school came about in its creation, they were having, like he said, when they made a decision to go full immersion, because I think it might have been in the English at first. So when they made the decision to go full immersion, they were looking for teachers, and my mother was asked again, like, can you come in? Can you teach? And I believe I might have been a baby at the time, and she was carrying my sister at the time, and she came in under the assumption that she was just going to be a substitute teacher until they find a better teacher. Well, in her words were, until they find a real teacher or a better teacher, because at the time they were taking, like Tommy had said, they were trying to get anybody who was willing and able and could volunteer to do it. So my mother had that in her head, that I'm only going to work for a little while and then I'm going to move on to something else. And she ended up staying for quite a bit. And at the time, my sister and I had gone to a different program, and she made the decision to move us into the Freedom School because of all the things that Tommy talked about. He said the commitment of the parents, the love, everything that they wanted their children to receive at this school. She said that it was almost like she had an epiphany one day, and she decided, like, I need to put my children in this school. She's like, it's not like the public run schools, it's not fancy, it's very grassroots. She said it was a homey feel. And when she made the decision to move us over, that's when we were introduced to the language, because at the time my sister and I had already been in the other program, like I had mentioned, and then with the birth of my brother plus my mother working at the school, it kind of sparked something in her and my father, where they decided, well, the language is very important, and if these parents are fighting so hard for it, that we need to do everything we can to make sure that the language survives. So out of 7 children, they decided that they were going to have at least one speaker, which they thought was going to be my brother. So they put all their effort into speaking the language to him right from birth. And my sister and I unintentionally picked up the language along with him, because we were still at the age where we were able to. So when we made the transition over to the Freedom School, it was a whole different environment that we had come from. And I have, like, my best memories are just going to school there, and like they had mentioned, like, we didn't have the luxuries of other schools. We didn't know what a gym was. We didn't have a bus, a cafeteria, like the things that I guess would consider like necessary in a public school system, but we made it work. Like our classrooms could be inside, they could be outside, our lessons could happen literally anywhere in the community. We followed the Untitled Chapter, like he said, and we followed the seasons, and all of our learning was very, very rooted in all of that. So coming from a home where things like that were lost because of residential school, there was like a revival within my family. And then I had done all of the rest of my elementary and my junior high education at the Freedom School. And when it was time for me to go to high school, I kind of had a bit of a crisis. I didn't want to go because I kind of, like how Sakokwenionkwas said, I didn't want to lose all of these things that I had just learned throughout the years that I was at the Freedom School. So I sat my parents down, and one of the teachers of the 8th grade, her name was Elizabeth Perkins, and we came to the decision that I was going to try and attempt to do an additional year at the school. I had heard of other students trying it before me. So I made the decision that that's what I was going to do, and I did it. And then when we went to transfer over, because they don't consider it applicable, I guess, I ended up having to do 9th grade over in the public school, which I didn't mind. I went, I did it. I struggled the first half of the 9th grade. It wasn't like, it was coming from such a small school and it feeling like going to, almost like a homeschool version. So when I had gone to high school, I was very shell shocked. And I was very aware that what I had been learning throughout the years was much different than what they had been learning throughout their educational careers. So the 4 years I latched onto, we had community members who I really looked up to, and I latched onto them while at school in order to kind of preserve what I had learned. I was very fortunate to have teachers like Gajit Juni Fox, Lorena Gahandineso, Mary McDonald, and all throughout high school, those were people that, even though I had to be in the public school setting, it was still comforting to have those teachers at the school and them running programs where I could still participate in things that I had been learning all throughout my elementary education. And then when I had coming up to graduating high school, when you're getting ready to decide what college you're going to go to and what your next move is going to be, I had always known that I had wanted to be a teacher, and more specifically an immersion teacher in the language, because my parents had taught there. Quite a few of my family members were in the education area. So when it was time to go to college, I kind of had an idea that I ran by my parents. They weren't too enthusiastic about it at the time, but now looking back, they're very happy that that was the decision that I had made for myself. So because I knew that I wanted to be an immersion teacher, I knew that there was going to be no program in secondary education that would be able to teach me anything that I would need to know to become a language teacher. So my idea was I was going to go to the Freedom School, and I was going to teach for 1 year just to get a feel for how it is to teach in the language. And then after that, I had put my education on a 1 year hold. I froze it. But I ended up liking teaching so much that I kind of told my mom, I was like, well, I don't really see necessarily why I would need to go on to secondary education, especially when there is no programming available to teach or how to train a teacher to become an immersion language teacher. It's very, very different than anything that you're taught and to be an educational teacher in the public schools and English programming. So I had done the 1 year, and then when it was time to go for my second year, I had my first child, my daughter at the time. And then while I was away, I had entrusted my class to my sister. And then when I was done my maternity, we came back and we taught together in a team teaching type setting, which I find the most beneficial in my way of teaching, is because the students are able to hear that live communication between two speakers. So they're hearing the speaking coming in a more natural way. So they're able to hear it, see it, and participate in it. And that was the way that I catered and taught my programming. And a lot of it was based off of what I had learned throughout my elementary education at the Freedom School. So I had a good base. I had already known where the school had come from. I had gone through the program. So I took a lot of all my teachers that I had respected and I had learned from all throughout my time being at the Freedom School, and I infused that into my teaching. And even the teachers that I was currently working with, I was always trying to make connections with them to see how to kind of create my own methodologies and or implement things that they had been doing while I was a student and now that I'm a teacher. So I did a lot of reaching out and peer working. And a lot of it was we did right along with the seasons, like we would start in the summer, so we were getting ready for harvest, and it would follow our ceremonies and bringing in things that we had planted and getting it ready to store for the winter. And then we would work with the older grades who were a little bit more physically capable of handling, like if they needed to can foods, they were more apt to work with like stoves, knives, things like that, and they would work along with the little kids. So I was always teaching in the younger grades, so I was able to provide the language and the support that the little guys needed, so in order that the older students would be able to work with right alongside with the little guys. And it's been the best experience of my life. I've been able to enroll my children into the school now that I've had 4 children, and I just always gravitate back to the school because it's literally I grew up in the school, and my children are growing up in it, and I just believe in it, like all the foundations, everything that has to do with the school.
So you had the opportunity to kind of live in both worlds of the education system. You know,
Yeah.
the Freedom School and regular high school.
Yeah.
What do you see as some of the big differences between the two?
The big differences
Stands out
are,
to you.
well, like the shell shock I had talked about was because of the type of program we are able to be on, you kind of get to view your teacher as a parental,
Friend.
in a, yeah, like a parental way.
Yeah.
Or a mentor, or more of a mentor
yeah.
more than a teacher.
Yeah, a mentor, even a grandparent. They could be like an aunt or an uncle. That was the feeling that you would get from it. And we would always use their Mohawk name, like we were on a first name basis. That doesn't happen in public schools. So having to go from always knowing my teacher on a first name basis to having to put a Mr. or Miss in front of it was very just awkward and didn't feel comfortable. We learned everything through our traditional teachings and our ways and everything. So having to go into a public school setting and then having to be told, well, this is the history of the US or the Canadian, and having to accept that, if even that's the word, like there was a lot of apprehension going on where we knew through things that we learned from home or from the community or from the school that that's not the way that everything happened, and a lot of stuff was changed or left out or not even taught at all. So having to kind of go through that program and learn this when you know deep down that it's not what happened or it's not true was really, really difficult to carry all throughout my high school years. Going from having one teacher for a whole day to having to have, in my experience, 9 separate teachers, 40-minute class and 40-minute bursts. That was it was a big adjustment. And just the one thing that really, really surprised me was we were always told that our demeanor was a lot different than children who had gone through the public school systems. And we were always getting told that or complimented on that. And I never understood why why it was like that, because that was just a normal thing at the Freedom School. Was you had that mutual respect for your teachers, your peers. And so to go to a high school setting and be told that not everybody does that was it was odd.
Yeah, we were never taught that. We were never taught respect, mutual respect and understanding in school when we were growing up.
Yeah, and it was like a
You
core
know, I grew up in the regular school system, which
Yeah.
I didn't like. Tommy, I didn't like it at all. I remember I spoke Italian when I first went. I grew up with my grandmother and grandfather. They didn't speak English, so I ended up learning Italian very fluently. In my first day in school, me and my Italian friends kept on getting reprimanded for speaking Italian in kindergarten.
Aw.
So I remember what that's like. But I ended up quitting high school for that very same reason, that I just couldn't see how that form of education was going to get me to where I wanted to go.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I'm dyslexic, so high school and learning from books and written language is not my way of learning, but something that was, it's interesting to see that. And I can say this from 35 years of experience, living, partially living with some of you folks and working with you folks and different people at Akwesasne, that the kids that have gone through the school, or now that they're adults, they're just amazing, and it's all that I can see rooted in what you folks learned at the school. Yeah. So I appreciate that you're able to do what you do.
Yeah.
You love doing it. That's the beautiful thing. It's obvious that you love doing it.
Yeah, and I didn't see, I had on one, I think it was my first or second year officially teaching, one of my past teachers found something that I had written. It was like a practice essay or something, and I wrote right in there, I must have only been 11, that I'm going to be a Mohawk immersion teacher, and that's what I'm going to do. And she said that was it was amazing that she got to see that happen while she was still there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But what was obvious, though, that even that at that very young age, you were given the opportunity to pursue that versus being told you've got to learn this, and that don't relate to what you want to pursue. Yeah. Which is
Yeah.
really nice. Thank you for that. John, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about all the courses that you've put together for all the different, you were asked to actually put together some courses for a number of the Indian schools. So if you could talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
Sure thing. Yeah, thank you all for letting me join you this evening, and bless the Freedom School. I think the very first time I was coming to this, John, from what was called the Aboriginal Community College in South Australia. Later on, it was called Taundi, and it was a grassroots initiative by the Aboriginal community of South Australia. In a nutshell, a group of people who dropped out of school when they were in the 3rd grade or 4th grade, and then became parents and had children in the 3rd and 4th grade, and couldn't help them with their homework. They were too old to go to school. They didn't have the language skills to go to back to school themselves. And Tom mentioned ABCs, and that was one of my students, Peter. I said, "How are you with the ABCs?" He goes, "A, B, C. Ah, shit. What's the next one?" I said, okay. So I had people of all different skill levels within my grade. And for Tom Porter, I need to tell, I was actually hired as the part-time country western guitar teacher for the college. So I was, singing "Hello, Darling" and all those songs. And I was learning Merle Haggard, for my students. They wanted to learn country western music. And then they found out I was a teacher, and I became a teaching resource person. This was 1978, 79, 1980. And my students were so taken with the word that I was bringing them from Akwesasne via the Akwesasne notes. And they said, oh, those guys, they're so brilliant. They can express the things that we feel, but we can't say because we don't have the skills. So I said, well, let's get you the skills. So I went over to Akwesasne in 1981. I took a trip back to the United States, and I went on the invitation of Ron LaFrance, Sr., and I went to the notes office, and I camped out on Loran Thompson's land, and people had gone off to Restigouche. There was some trouble with the Micmac people and their fishing boats and the government. And so I grasped what was going on was very similar to what was happening in Australia. In Australia, the struggle was land rights, getting land rights back. And it was a time of great cultural renewal. And the college was a center of cultural renewal. And I was also the English second language teacher for the Pichanchara, for the tribal people that came down from the Central Desert. So I was into the music, I was into the culture, I was into the politics, I was into the education. And when I got to Akwesasne, nobody had anything for me to do one day. And so they asked me to go with this guy whose name was Pluto. And they said he was going to be burning some brush piles. And they later told me we were clearing the land for the Freedom School. And so I thought, oh, okay. So that's where I first heard about it, was in 1981. And so then there were lots of things that happened, and I took word back to Australia, and they were really moved by what was going on with the White Roots of Peace. They adored the peacemaker. They couldn't believe the brilliance of the great law of the opening. And so that was something. When I came back to the United States in 1984 and went back to Akwesasne, the people there asked me, share with us what they showed you over in Australia. And so what I was doing was basically bridging two brilliant cultures or continental understandings. And I began doing camps. And so we put together some camps with Ray Fadden and the Fadden family. It was John and Eva and Ray and Christine. It was all the kids. And we did camps. The students from those camps are in their 50s this year. Notably would be Jim Bruchak with his Ndakina Center and a nationwide, nationally known storyteller, tracker. And so I began to pass along all the things I had learned culturally from the Aboriginal elders. And I guess people enjoyed it. Let's put it that way. I began to work with Jake Swamp and with Judy. We formed something we called Tracking the Roots of Peace. And Jake and I began to do tree plantings. And I met Mr. Tom Porter and his wife and his daughters through the Sacred Circle. We began doing all kinds of programs. And one day, Joyce Mitchell came up from the chief's office. She came to Ontitled. And she said, we're going to write a Mohawk-friendly math and science curriculum. And we're going to call it the Akwesasne Science and Math Pilot Program. And she wondered if I would help put experiential lessons to the writing that their writers would do. And so for 10 years, from 1993 to 2004, I came up to Paul Smith's and went camping with sometimes more than 100 youth from the Mohawk Nation. And we ran camps and we did programs and we made up exercises to go with the language. Because I did hear Elvera say on a YouTube, we don't want the language to become a classroom language. We want it to be a living, grand experience. And I was working with people in Hawaii through the Punana Leo program because they were also forbidden to speak their language. And they were bringing back their language. And when Jake and I would go to Hawaii, we would go visit the Hawaiian language immersion programs, and we would share strategies and techniques from Freedom School to Hawaii, to Aotearoa, to the Maori people, and my Australian experience. So just working it like a string of beads, bringing all the good news from each different people to each different people. And so I had that experience, and it's so beautiful to think that the opening could be the basis of a curriculum because it's so complete, it's so beautiful, beginning with the people and then doing your earth studies and then studying the waters and then studying the things in the water, and it's logical, it's clear, it's deep and cultural. And so I share that idea as I travel with other Indigenous people. Maybe you could base your schools on your culture. And I just thought tonight, as Tom was speaking, let me tell you a story a little bit different from what I normally tell. And that is, how does this work now then in the life of John Stokes and this tracking project? As we travel around the world, meeting with the elders of all the different Indigenous nations, and they see that we're doing something beautiful, and they say, would you put a piece of our culture into this thing you're building? And the thing I've been building has been visualized as a turtle, that we're bringing the pieces of the turtle back together, the pieces of our grand human family with respect. And I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but I don't have a colonized mind. I have the opposite. I've been taught by the best elders in the world. I have an indigenized mind. So when I hear an elder say something to me, I believe it, and I wait for science to prove it later. Other people, they do it the other way, but I don't. So whether it's the makeup of water, whether it's the tectonic plates on the earth, whether it's the water coming from outer space, if a native elder has told me that that's the way it is, then that's the way I believe it to be. So I went down to Brazil. I have a whole project in Brazil. There are some 200 tribes in Brazil, and they're very beautiful, and they're very powerful. And I was with a group called the Umuchina. One of my students had a vision one day. She's an Indian girl from the Baka Iri people. And she said, I want to do what you do, John, with my people. And so she put together an Arts of Life program with all the different cultural things for all the tribes of her region. And the elders all came together and they brought the youth to learn the skills. And one of the elders looked at the others and he said, this is so much fun. We never do this. We only get together because of crisis. We only get together when there's trouble. We don't get together for fun and to celebrate ourselves. So she called it Círculo dos Saberes, a circle of knowledges. And everybody loved it. In the first year, 11 tribes came, and the next year, 17 tribes came, and it was very popular. So I got to attend one of them. And so I was, I'm kind of like the grandpa, right? Because I taught her and she shared it with all them. And we made fire. And we do fire with a hand drill style, which was taught to us by an elder from Jemez Pueblo here in New Mexico. And his name is Jose Ray Toledo. And he saw me making fire by myself one day. And he said, oh, why don't you do it with 4 people? He said, you white people, you always like to do things by yourself. He said, we're Native people, we're community oriented, and we like to do things together. So he showed me how to use a different person in the 4 directions. And he said, the coal will hop out of the board like a living being. And I'll be darned, sure enough. So we were there in the village of the Umuchina, surrounded by Indian kids from many nations, and we made the fire. One of the guys who was making it was Solar, one of my students, and the other was this very handsome young man named Luciano. And I say this to make Tom smile, but you know, some guys are so handsome, it's not fair. They took it all and they didn't leave any for the rest of us. And that's this guy, Luciano. He's so handsome. And he had his Jaguar teeth on and he had his paint. And I was just like, I got to get rid of this tank top and shorts. I got to get cool like these guys. Well, we made the fire and Luciano said to me, will you come meet our elder? And so I said, of course. And that afternoon we went to the home of an older man whose name was Joaquin. And we arrived and there were some 13 young men accompanied us, 13 or 14, Solar, myself, and we walked in. And Joaquin was sitting on his hammock and he had his stick, they call a bordona. And as he sat there, his mouth was like this. It was a reverse smile, yeah, like this. And I walk in and he goes, you tell me how you make fire, and then I'll tell you how I make fire. And I said, okay. And that's the way they scare you, the old fellas. Yeah, they want to see what you got. So I pull out my board and I pull out my stick and I start to explain and I get to here and I get to there and then I say, and then we get 4 guys around the board. And he stops and he says, 4 guys around the board? That's brilliant. It's really hard to do with just one guy. Go on. But now that scowl it was like this now. And he's sitting there holding the stick and next thing we made the fire and he just burst into this big smile. He looked at all the young men in the room and he said, why do we have a gringo here today in my house talking to me about fire? None of you guys ever come to my house and I am the last fluent speaker of our language. So one of the young men said, Uncle, will you come to our gathering tomorrow and speak to us all? And he looks up at me and he says, is this guy going to be there? And they said, yes. He said, then I'll come. And the next day Joaquin came and he scolded everybody, same way. How come no one comes to my house? How come no one comes to learn from me when I'm the last remaining speaker of our language? Program ended, 2 years went by. I got an email from a friend who said, I know you like stories like this, John. And it was a story that Luciano had gotten a grant, become a teacher, and he was working with Joaquin to bring back the Umuchina language. And they had put together a book and they were teaching the children. That's the kind of thing that I've been engaged in. Taking all the teachings from Tom, from Jake, from Akwesasne, from the Freedom School, from Australia, and traveling around the world to help share them. And what's so beautiful is the respect that all the different nations have for each other. When you present them with an idea that's from far away and they say, that is really brilliant, we're going to incorporate that. So that's the process that I've been involved in bringing the pieces together again. And to see something like the Freedom School continuing on through the years and the beautiful things that emerge from that. The language it has to be there. And so it is a foundation. So anyway, thank you. I hope that wasn't too long.
Not at all. Well, if Tom or Elvera, if any of you folks want to add on to any of this, feel free to do so. Unmute yourself. And one thing that, from hearing all of you folks talk is that the importance of rooting education within a culture, because in America, we don't really have a culture. We have consumerism, and that that's a pretty shallow form of culture, in my opinion. Yet you folks have this very rich culture, which is thousands of years old, that you're able to keep alive, and what's very important. And I don't know, when I look at Kawennahente and seeing her, the light in her eyes when she speaks about how teaching makes her feel so good, and knowing that her kids are going to be able to go to that school and carry on that tradition, or to hear Tommy, who I know for a very long time was one of the few people who knew how to do a funeral or a real wedding, talk about young kids now being able to take over that role from him, that to me is very fulfilling to see that happen. It's something I've wanted to see happen, for a long time. So that's really beautiful. So if you want to, elaborate on anything at all, please do so. Go ahead.
So I just want to say that what John Stokes said is just was wonderful to hear that story. In fact, when he was talking about Akwesasne Freedom, I just want to share that when it was located in Owl's Head, the lady that inherited that place there donated that land to the Freedom School. And so what we're thinking of doing there is to do like outdoor teaching. It's in the Adirondacks. It's 240 acres that she gave us. It's just amazing up there, and it was just such a generous gift for her to give to us. I actually just met her not too long ago, and this all happened in 2015, I think it was. So all these stories have really been so amazing. All the help that we've gotten here at the school, and I'm really proud to be a part of it today. But I don't know, like how much, I don't know how much longer I can work. I'm getting older here. But I'm hoping that I'm passing on what I've learned doing this work onto other someone to come behind me and take over when it's time for me to really leave, quit working. I think it's gonna be a little bit longer, but it's coming. So I hope that many young people who may be watching would want to learn from us, just like you have all learned from us too, and be willing to share that. Like I was telling John earlier, I said that we have visitors from all over the world. About 3 years ago, we had visitors from Siberia, and they had heard about us up there. So it's really amazing how far this school has flown to, I guess. And I know some of the people at the Ponanoleo school. I went to visit there. I think it was 2013, and the person that helped them get started was from here, was from Akwesasne. That was Dorothy Lazor, and she's traveled throughout Indian country, also helping people get their school started. So we're far-reaching now, especially now with the internet and all this. There's so many things that we can share. I'm part of a consortium of immersion school. What's it called? National Alliance of Immersion Programs in the U.S. and they're all schools like ours. in the throughout the U.S. anyway. And when they had a meeting in Hawaii, there were people from New Zealand that were there. And, the things that we do here is so similar to what they do there. So it's growing. The revitalization of our languages is growing everywhere. Even now in the public schools, I've seen in a paper a call out for people who have traditional knowledge and are willing to come to their schools and teach what we've been teaching for, the last 20 years. So that's very encouraging that they want to do that. So I'm going to show you the T-shirt that I went to get earlier. I hope you can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then on the back is all the elements of the, like the people, the Mother Earth, all the way down to Sakokwenionkwas, the creator. So if you want to order it, you can order it on our website. And then we also have a book that was done. It's called Freedom Mohawk, and it was researched and it's by Dr. Llewellyn White, and she did her dissertation on research that she did at the school, and then came out with a book. So that's also available on our website. We have many researchers that come to visit, but sometimes it's hard because we never hear back from them. So it's like, how much do we give away? But I suppose that's what we're supposed to do anyway. So I think that's all for me.
Well, I know if you want to start doing some outdoor events based in nature up at Owl's Head, John is the person to talk to.
Really? Awesome.
He's got a wealth of things he could do with children in nature.
Okay. So you need to send us his contact information.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make sure that you connect afterwards.
Okay. That's awesome. I just love this.
Very good. Okie doke. Anything else anybody wants to talk about?
Mr. Tom? I'll share the books if you'd like, John, just because you asked me to.
Oh yeah. So what? Okay. One thing I wanted to share with folks is everybody can. This is Tom's book, and Grandma Said, and there's a picture of Tommy when he was like really young and really handsome. He's still handsome. That was when he was really young and handsome. But anyway, this is a great book if anybody wants to start to learn about a lot of information that you won't find anywhere else. This is a great place, and John has a number of he has his the Thanksgiving address books that he put together in many different languages that he can talk about there that folks can get.
Before I say anything, was Tom interested in speaking again?
Not at the moment.
No? Okay. I didn't want to jump in. Well, this is a book about dreams. Tomorrow night, I'm going to do a class on dreams, and I do it once a month with my my darling Lisa and her Shade Tree Center. And I open to this page, and the quote at the bottom says, "Sometimes dreams alter the course of an entire life." And the first thing I thought of was Tom Porter. Who would think that Tom would write a book about everything, and that the dream of his grandma told him. And I just thought that was super cool. But this wasn't a dream that told me. This was Jake made a request that he thought the opening should be put into all the different languages of the world, and I made an effort to begin the process. But at the beginning, we just had the English version. And so we did it in the English. And the next we did was German. We did it in Swedish, Spanish, Japanese. We have one in a language from the Philippines, Visayan. We have it in Portuguese. We have it in French. We have it in Hawaiian. And I wanted to say too, Elvira, in the early 1990s, they were telling us that these languages were 2 seconds to midnight, that they were going to vanish, that the Mohawk language was going to vanish, and the Hawaiian language was going to vanish. So I started the clock on my oven, and 20 years later, I put out a book in English and Mohawk. Sorry, Hawaiian and Mohawk. And then we have it in Italian, and we have it in Hebrew. And I explained last time we got together, the people at Onondaga asked if we had one in Hebrew to share with lacrosse players that were coming to play. So sharing the idea of Thanksgiving is so strong. The ideas that are coming out of the Mohawk Nation are so powerful. And for the future, what I'd like to say is that our experience at the Aboriginal College was that if you take that Aboriginal child, if you take that Mohawk child, if you take that Zuni child, and they're not proud of who they are, and they're not feeling solid about who they are, you can teach them anything in the world, but it won't be there. They have to feel good about who they are. They have to feel solid about who they are as an Indian, as a Hawaiian, as an Aborigine, and then you can put it on, right? And that's what we learned at the college. So why I chose tracking as a vehicle was because the Aborigines are all such great trackers. And when they saw an old man who could track, they realized we all could do that. That's what I come from. And it made them very proud. So that was why I chose tracking and why I called it the Tracking Project, because everybody was nature-based. And that's where their strength came from, was their land and their sacred sites. And so in working with the elders of the world, tracking was the vehicle that I chose to be able to touch everybody and work with the children of all the different tribes. So I just thought I wanted to put that out, that thought. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really nice. Yeah, I guess you know, listen to what you just said. It just made me realize that the reason for any of the disconnection that we may feel, Americans right now may be feeling, is because we don't have any roots in nature. You know, yes, we go for walks and we may watch some nature videos here and there, but very few people have are really rooted in nature where they can say they have a intimate relationship with Mother Nature. And I think that's something that we have to really work on cultivating, is creating an intimate relationship with Mother Nature and everything around us, so that we feel part of it, so that nature becomes our friend and our father, our brother, our lover, our sister, everything. You know, it's not just this thing that we can't relate to and we're scared of because it has storms and it gets angry and, you know, and floods us or whatever. Somehow I'm always taken care of and safe. And I attribute that to the connection that I've been able to create with Mother Nature and having an intimate relationship. And I want to thank you, John, for being able to teach me a lot of those things, because I learned a lot of those things from you. So thank you.
No. Cool.
So anyway, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I just want to let folks know that the Freedom School is something dear to my heart. Elvira, by the way, I have a quilt that I bought in 1986. Judy Swamp made it. I'm going to donate that next year, and we can say that it's a big starburst quilt, and Judy was the main person behind creating that one. So
Wow.
I'll donate that one for you folks next year. So remind me to do that.
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to donate to the Freedom School, when I post this on YouTube, I'll have all the links for doing that.
Okay.
But it's something that is dear to my heart. I know it's dear to Tommy's heart. And I just want to thank all of you for coming and listening tonight. So thank you all so very much. Ona.
Oh no.
John,
Yes, Tom.
do you have a couple minutes?
Yes. Oh, yeah. We got to. Yeah, we can.
I'm not sure. I just wanted to share with you that I did have an experience, and I shared it with some on the computer before, but I don't know if anybody here knows. But on September 22nd, I think they call it equinox. It's coming
Yeah.
on September 22nd.
Yeah.
And that's the day when I gather my family here, and we have a meal. And we don't drive a car or anything that has gas or motor or oil. Just to walk or canoe or even ride bicycles, okay, but no motor, no nothing. All day from sunrise to sundown. And then when we finish eating, we explain to my kids and grandkids who Mother Earth is, why is she our Mother Earth, and what does for us and our people and our life. So at sunrise on the equinox, right at sunrise, before the sun comes at dawn, we burn tobacco to welcome that day in honor of the Mother Earth. And when you finish doing that, then you share a meal with your family and explain to them, your whole family, what's the Mother Earth, and introduce them to her and honor her that day, so that Mother Earth and all her kids can know each other intimately. And then, as the sun is ready to go down, you burn tobacco again. You make a fire and you burn tobacco again, and to honor again the Mother Earth and the sun and what the Creator gave to us. That's twice a year we should to do that. But when that, I suspect is the Mother Earth talked to me, she said, you don't have to do it unless you really want to do it, but don't feel threatened or don't feel coerced in any way.
Mm.
Only the people who wants to do it should do it, but not because they were twist their arm or threaten them in any way. It's got to be completely because I want to do it. And so that September is coming up again. So I have been doing this now. This December will be 3 years when that woman talked to me, who I think is the Mother Earth. She said she is the Mother Earth. That's what she wanted. But to make sure people knows that they don't really have to do it if they don't want to. But if they want to honor and love the Mother Earth, then they will do it willingly. So that's it. So I want to thank everybody, especially Elvera and the two John and John, and better than Tom, and our teacher. Oh, what a wonderful talk she did too, and the story of how she grew up. I remember her when she was a little girl. And so the history there is Freedom School is not just a school, it's a revival. It's a part of a spiritual movement from the Creator. So I say, all the listeners, thank you very much, and I'll say good night.
Good night. Thank you, everyone.
But
Everyone.
John, I think
Yep.
Well, either John, maybe you can close it a little bit with a short Thanksgiving. For that's the custom of our Mohawk people.
Okay, John Stokes, I will let you do that because you're much better at it than me.
Oh, short, Tom?
Doesn't have to be long, just long as we close it spiritually.
All right. Well, we the people of good heart and good mind, yeah, who care about these important things, we want to say thank you for this opportunity to bring our minds together as we did and to share these important thoughts in the name of the children and all the ones to come and to our beautiful ancestors. So now our minds are one. The beautiful mother, the earth, and she is so beautiful every day, so giving and so kind. It's a small thing for us to send her our love and our thanks that she might continue in a good way. And now our minds are one to the waters and the beautiful waters of the world. And I heard that the water conveys the vitality around the world, and so may it always do so. So with one mind we'll greet and thank the water. Now our minds are one. And to the sea creatures, the fish life, who are very smart, they're very kind, they're very generous, and they're very aware. And so to all the good work that they do, keeping the waters clean, we send greetings and thanks. And our minds are one. And to all the plants, there's so many different ones, to the little ones and to the wild foods and the berries, and to the three sisters in our gardens. This is the time we bring in the harvest, and thank you to the plants for giving their bodies to us that we might live, and we send them our greetings and our thanks. And now our minds are one. To the medicines and to the tobacco, that special leader, and to all the plants that keep us well in these times. They keep us in balance and give us good strength. So to all the medicine people, greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one. To the beautiful animals, both the domestic and the wild, may there always be a place for these animals in our hearts and in our minds, and may we always take care of them. They know so much and they have so much to teach us. So we send our love to all the animals. Now our minds are one. To the trees and all their many things they do for us, for the shelter and the shade and the wood. And I know the trees have a lot to share with us for our continued survival here on the earth. So may there be many trees, and may they all live a long life. With love, we greet them and thank them. And our minds are one. To the birds, all the beautiful ones, from the little hummingbird to the mighty eagle, to the condor. They have many things that they do too. And so for their efforts and their work, we send them our love and our thanks, and now our minds are one. So to the winds that blow with a great force, and my friend on Maui says they also can be so soft they tickle our skin with love. They can be so gentle and they can be so fierce. So to the wind in all of its moods, we send our greetings and our thanks. Now our minds are one. To Ladiwelas, the thundering grandparents, about whom I learned so much from the Onkwehonwe, and how to speak to them and how to greet them, and the protocol that we should follow, that they come and bring their gift to us. To our powerful grandparents, we send greetings and thanks, and our minds are one. To the sun, who is taking his face and he's gone over the horizon, but we hope tomorrow he'll shine his beautiful radiance upon us and bring his energy. And greetings and thanks to our elder brother. And to the moon, our beautiful grandma. She's so strong, powerful, so gentle, and she helps us tell time, and she watches over all the birds, the fish, the plants, the women, the waters of the earth. And so to our grandma, we send greetings and love. Now our minds are one. Oh, to the stars and the beings that we know live in the stars, to our history in the stars and to our future. We send the greetings and thanks to all the star beings. Now our minds are one. To the messengers, the four messengers and the spirits that watch over us. Jake would always say they stand with their hands on our shoulder and they guide us and protect us individually and as a human family. So we send our love and thanks, and our minds are one. To Kanatsiohareke, to the enlightened teachers, as we say, to all the teachers who come and carry the mind of the maker and help us remember how to live in harmony and respect with each other. We send greetings and thanks. And our minds are one. And to Shokwayatiso, the one who made us so beautiful and created a world and gave us everything we could ever need to live a good life. We send our greetings and our thanks and our most special blessings and prayers to our Creator, and our minds are one. And now I thank you, Mr. Tom Porter, and all that you've shared with me and how to do these things in a good way. And I hope I did a good job for you, and I hope that we're all blessed to come back together again and put our good minds together for the children and for the earth. And now our minds are one.
Oh.
Oh. Yama.
Thank you all so much again.